This industry today accounts for 4% of the global carbon footprint. I'm only talking about textile dyeing. I spent 25 years in this industry. It's sick, it must regenerate, it must reinvent itself. And then you say, I might have a small lever here that can help this industry. The entire challenge is to offset the additional costs we might incur initially for our pigment by leveraging all other potential savings and ultimately achieve a balance that is as neutral as possible for the dyer and consequently for the brand. It truly is a battle. We can clearly see that. We must simultaneously contend with economic pressures and seek out expertise, skill sets, and profiles that no longer exist. Therefore, it implies that at a certain point when you aim to relaunch something, it inevitably takes time. Instead of being on the side of those who have problems, that is, who need 100-line Excel spreadsheets, I'll try to go to the other side, to those who offer a line for that spreadsheet that truly changes the game.
Hello, Philippe. I'm
Hi,
truly
Antonin.
delighted to welcome you to one of the very first episodes of Humans of Asterion. You are today the CEO of Everdye, a deep tech company we've been supporting with Asterion since its seed funding. You've just announced a Series A, and you are now one of the pioneers in the massive decarbonization of the global textile and fashion industries. Today, Everdye is running pilot projects with the biggest players in the fashion industry. And so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to discuss how, unfortunately, the fashion industry is still very carbon intensive today. And there's also something really interesting about your journey. You were previously the head of smaller businesses at La Redoute. You're one of the few who joined a startup, soon to be a scale-up, as CEO. We'll be discussing that today, but perhaps let's begin with the latest news from Everdye. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing, where you currently are, and your ongoing projects.
Yes, listen, I'm really happy to be able to discuss this with you. It's true, we've known each other since 2021 now. It's starting to add up. 2021, that's the year Everdye was founded and very quickly managed to raise a seed funding round, notably with Asterion. And that's how I personally came to know Everdye, because it so happened that I was asked to give my opinion on the matter. That's how it works at Asterion. There's quite an active community of business angels, and I gave my opinion, and it became one of my first personal investments. So, Everdye, what exactly is it? Everdye is what we call a deep tech company, and it's based on an invention that was developed by Amira Erokh. Amira Erokh, she is actually the founder. Now, I myself am not the founder. We'll probably get back to that a bit later, but Amira Erokh is the one who invented the core technology.
And after she actually invented it during her doctoral thesis, and it was by serendipity, as they say, meaning she was looking for something completely different.
And in our work on a textile that was intended to serve as a barrier against bacteriological attacks, she focused on the ionization of fibers, and these ions would have destroyed hostile bacteria. And then she noticed it changed the fabric's color. At first, it wasn't good news for her thesis, but actually it became the basis for a study on color and garment dyeing. She developed this later, starting in 2021 by launching Everdye and then developing the tech. So Everdye is essentially a new way to dye to produce color on clothes. Color in clothing, I think it's as old as the world, in fact, practically as old as humanity. We quickly sought to create colors, initially using natural resources, pigments found in nature from shells, plants, soils, or clays, for example. And then, like any industry, there have been phases of invention and innovation. The most significant ones occurred in the mid-19th century, when we started to find ways to dye, carbon-based, in fact, by using chemistry that made the dyeing industry much more polluting. And then technologies developed, they became more refined, with an ever-increasing impact, somehow even carbon negative, but with obviously the very reason why we were doing it. It wasn't done to create carbon and pollute, because back then we didn't know carbon would have today's effects, but rather to develop stronger dyes with properties that natural dyes didn't have before. So it was primarily a positive technological breakthrough. And then, obviously today with climate change, we're interested in these activities because they're very carbon intensive. They're very carbon intensive because to dye a garment, you need a substance, you need a dyeing product. So a dye or a pigment, which itself comes from fossil fuels. It's a molecule synthesized from petroleum. And then to apply the molecule onto the fabric, you have to heat it because the chemistry involved needs to be boosted by energy, by a supply of heat. And so that's energy consumption plus auxiliary products to boost, once again, these reactions that are not natural, that are not spontaneous. So they need assistance. All this leads to both excessive energy consumption and thus a large amount of carbon, because much of the energy in the regions where these products are made is not decarbonized. And also water pollution, because many toxic chemicals are used, which are discharged almost everywhere unless water is treated, but that's rarely the case. This is an industry that today is estimated accounts for 4% of the global carbon footprint. I'm only referring to textile dyeing, and 20% of industrial water pollution. So you can see that's quite a major impact. It's one of the things that we must change in fashion, this industry that is so much criticized today.
It is huge how we haven't moved forward in this industry yet compared to others or...
So fashion hasn't necessarily been the pioneer in decarbonization. I think many efforts have been focused elsewhere. It's a rather traditional industry. And then there wasn't necessarily, once again, this industry's journey is very old since we started with natural dyes whose limitations we ultimately know. What I mean is, first, dyes, dyeing products and pigments are found in nature. That's true, but it's not necessarily done on a very large scale. And then the application of these natural dyes, these natural elements onto fibers isn't very durable. In fact, it doesn't meet the quality standards that have emerged and are developed today. So a technological disruption is needed, and there have been initiatives, but they're quite recent. In textiles, actually, there are two main, to put things in perspective, in textiles, there are two main contributions to the negative impact. There's the production of fibers. So behind that is either unsustainable farming, cotton, where we deforest, where we use a lot of pesticides. So there are many negative impacts. So that's purely an issue of agriculture. And then we have the substitution of these natural plant fibers, whether it's cotton, linen, or even hemp, historically, by synthetic fibers, which are themselves highly carbon intensive and are directly derived from petroleum. So all of this is a significant topic in its own right. We're talking about, well, yes, they need to practice better agriculture, as I previously mentioned. There's a lot of recycling and the regeneration of old fibers to create new fibers. So that was the first area of investigation for technology to try and solve the global problem of fashion and textiles. It was primarily about materials. And then the blind spot was dyeing. Why? I don't know. But in any case, perhaps because we couldn't say, we had to invent something new. So there are two major approaches today that currently exist. The first one that was investigated was producing pigments through biotech. So there are quite a few initiatives on that. And then there's Everdye's invention, which is totally different because it's not about biotech, it's about green chemistry. And that's a somewhat alternative path, we could say, to most initiatives that aim to transform dyeing, right? But why wasn't it done before? Perhaps manufacturers have been they've been somewhat stuck in a status quo, I believe. They haven't fully challenged themselves in that sector. There's been a lot of consolidation. The major chemical companies, the original producers of pigments and dyes, have rather seen a kind of concentration, a regrouping through acquisitions. First, there's a phase of market restructuring, and today the question is no longer about transforming dyes, but that mainly comes from startups. So obviously, chemical firms are still looking to make more efficient dyes, ones that consume less energy, etc. But overall, they are sticking to the petrochemical status quo.
It's also a question of regulatory and societal pressures, of course. So what is the current status of regulatory evolution and changes? And then we'll come to the societal aspects, specifically the expectations of our clients.
Yes, so indeed, we're in the context of fashion. Everyone talks about it, saying it's a disgusting industry. It's said to be the third most polluting. So it's quite a significant topic, especially since no one can... Ultimately, we can say this is a vital product, even if it's been discreetly suggested it wasn't. The reality is that until further notice, we'll be getting dressed. So we need to produce clothes. So the question of how this industry produces clothing is truly fundamental. And for me, the primary focus is to completely transform the way these products are manufactured. There's a lot of discussion about whether we should wear our clothes for longer, purchase second-hand items, and so on. All that needs to be done as well. But fundamentally, the lifeblood of this industry is how we actually produce new clothes. Or how we make new clothes from old ones. So all these are topics of circularity, topics of decarbonization. And regarding regulations, I'd say a lot of it originates from Europe. These regulatory initiatives that are driving the transformation of fashion. For instance, France introduced the IGC law, which has made it possible to prevent and ban waste. For example, prohibiting the destruction of unsold stock, a practice that was quite prevalent. Upcoming, for instance, there's environmental labeling, which allows a consumer to think about how they're going to choose their clothes if they want to buy items that are less impactful for nature.
With clear fashion, notably, which allows...
Exactly. Clear fashion is a very good solution for this, but regulations must be highly encouraging, even mandatory. It's a bit like the eco score on certain products, or the Nutri-Score, for example, for food. We can clearly see that when consumers are told a product is more or less good for their health, they are not completely stupid. They change their behavior.
Where is this taking place? Is it at a national French level or at a European level? And what exactly is the main issue here? Is the goal for things to move along more quickly? Is it so that once a project begins, it is genuinely applied and enacted as a decree afterwards?
Yes, it's played out on several, on both levels actually. Sometimes France is ahead and wants to push. It also has an influential role in Europe. So on many subjects, it pushes and sometimes legislates ahead. This is the case with environmental labeling, for example. France has made possible the use of a specific type of environmental display. It hasn't yet made it mandatory, but in any case, it has allowed various stakeholders to implement it before Europe does so in a few years' time. So France is playing a pioneering role. But obviously, we're in a European market, so all of this needs to be harmonized at the European level. And I think above all that Europe has an influential role on the planet because we're in a global industry. There are many brands in the textile sector, at least, many brands that are based in Europe, that originate from Europe. Europe plays an influential role through marketing. So European policy will impact these brands, which in turn will affect the entire supply chain and the whole industry that extends beyond Europe. Both because these products are shipped all over the world. We see this clearly with luxury goods or with many other brands that originate from Europe, which are global players. And because this European textile and clothing industry sources its products from regions that are, for the most part, in Asia, in China, in Southeast Asia, and the demands of these brands, which are influenced by European regulations, will impact the supply chain and manufacturers who are based globally outside Europe. So consequently, there is a kind of leadership influence from Europe that is critically important for transforming this industry, and regulation is a crucial element.
And customers, are they expecting less carbon-intensive clothing? At the same price, I imagine they'd hardly choose a decarbonized garment. But what's the acceptable price difference, especially in the current situation where prices are already rising?
That is a very broad topic. Today, if we look at the studies, yes, consumers tell themselves, yes, obviously, I am sensitive to the issue of sustainability, or more generally to the durable aspect, meaning both its physical quality, but also the impact of my clothing on the planet. But in reality, they are not entirely ready to pay a premium. And the reality of obviously the market share of sustainable products is growing, but provided there's an economic balance that's quite delicate and not too, if it means paying twice the product's price, obviously the consumer won't go for it. So they're not really ready to pay a premium, but they are still sensitive to the issue. And I return to the topic of regulation. It itself can act or compel, depending on the pressure we exert, market players to promote products that are more or less ethical, and conversely, to ban those that are absolutely not. So there is still a significant role for regulation or for balancing the market. Now, there are already many regulations in place, so it's not necessarily about introducing even more. We're talking about China right now, but it's somewhat the ultimate example, the very pinnacle of absurdity, if you will. But there isn't necessarily a need to reintroduce regulations just to prevent actors like that from behaving in such a manner. So, well, consumers are sensitive to the issue, but they're not entirely ready to take that step. And so it's up to the industry to find solutions to enable the production of clothing. I'm talking about the industry, the manufacturing side. Brands will adopt them. They will adopt these processes if, obviously, they come with reasonable premiums. And all of that is a matter of scale. So it's a rather slow movement for there to be a technological disruption and for us to switch to other technologies.
Let's move on to Everdye. You're already available in stores today.
So you can find us occasionally in stores through capsules we make with our partners, absolutely. In Europe, not yet, since we started in the United States, but it will come to Europe, yes, quite soon.
So when you find a garment in a store, its environmental impact is much more positive than for clothing not dyed with an Everdye dye.
If we were to do the exercise, and we are currently doing it with Claire Fashion, yes, there would be a much better score, to put it very simply. Instead of being at 80, we could perhaps, it completely depends on the garment we're talking about, it depends on many other things, so it's difficult to put specific numbers on it, but the score of the equivalent product without Everdye would be significantly lower than the product with Everdye. Why? Because we estimate that the carbon footprint, the impact of our technology on the product's carbon footprint represents 70 to 80% at the dyeing stage. And when this is applied to the final garment, we can confidently state that it results in a 20 to 25% reduction in the overall carbon footprint.
Because what else is there? When you think about
It's the production of the fiber.
And then, of course, a little bit of transportation.
But then, there's all the rest. There's the fiber, first of all. If we go chronologically, we have to make the fiber, then spin it, produce the fiber, then spin it to make the fabric.
So all of that is still part of the footprint. And then indeed, as you say, there's the manufacturing, there's the transport to our markets. But that's not what weighs heavily because if, for a very large part, textile transport is done by boat. So the footprint is relatively low when compared to the product itself. By the way, for example, something that brands could really take action on is to stop transporting products, flying products from their production areas to the consumption zones by plane. This is something that happens extensively in the luxury industry. So there you have an enormous waste of carbon emissions that might even surpass the actual production of the product itself. That's precisely where the sheer absurdity of it all lies. Well, ultimately, that's just their marketing strategy. A collection capsule, it needs to be available at the same time all over the world in all of the brand stores. And so this is the marketing practice that somehow leads to a form of environmental waste. But here's the thing, the major contributors to a textile product's carbon footprint are the fiber, the dyeing process, and then the rest in much smaller quantities. So when we act decisively on the dyeing, we have a massive impact on the product itself. And it's important to know that let's say an average textile brand that you're familiar with, one that doesn't manufacture, that doesn't own its factories, that sources its materials from, if we're talking about regions outside Europe, it's 80 to 85%, or its carbon footprint is 80 to 85% due to the product's manufacturing process.
Let's project ourselves a few years into the future. Environmental labeling has been widely adopted for all fashion products that we purchase at our favorite stores. Products that use Everdye dye will achieve a score 20 to 25% higher.
Yes, more or less. I can't quite put it into words, but it's definitely far superior to a product that relies on conventional dye.
The expectations and concerns of consumers have only continued to grow, especially considering the current situation, which shows no signs of improving. We can clearly see the significant interest there will be for fashion brands to collaborate with you, provided that the price premium isn't too substantial. So how exactly do you address this particular point?
So I absolutely agree with what you're saying, and it's not 5 years from now, if you like. They're already very interested because they know adoption cycles are quite long, and precisely to work on the scale effect because it is a scale effect. Today, petrochemical pigments, which are produced in hundreds of thousands, even millions of tons by factories that are ultra optimized and so on. So in chemistry, the scale effect is truly massive. So we're in chemistry, and we need to achieve economies of scale to lower the price of our pigment. We've obviously looked into this. That's the whole point. How we can manage to reduce the price so that our pigment's cost is absorbable by the dyer without any premium for the brand. In fact, our technology enables significant savings, extending far beyond just the pigment's cost. As I mentioned earlier, it requires a great deal of energy. So there's energy purchasing, water treatment, the cost of machines, and a whole lot of other chemicals. On all these aspects, we help them make colossal savings. That is, since we use 80 to 90% less energy, that means lower costs on that side. The water is clean and it's potentially reusable. So you'll have reduced costs for, there are water treatment costs, and there are even lower water purchasing costs. The dyeing itself is 3 to 4 times faster than traditional treatments. So that means for the dyer, they have 3 to 4 times more capacity with one machine, with a given machine. So for them, these are huge savings. So there you have it. The whole game is to offset the extra cost we might have initially on our pigment with all the other savings and reach a balance that is as neutral as possible for the dyer and therefore for the brand.
So this is the entire path that we must manage to successfully chart with the dyers and for the ultimate benefit of the brands.
So tell us about the next 5 years. What are the major milestones you're aiming for? What kind of technology are you currently developing? And how much funding will be needed to massively deploy your solution?
So the main steps are, simply put, for dyeing, we obviously need all the colors. It works by trichromy, it's like a paint palette. Just as we all learned to create colors from the 3 primary ones, it's quite similar. So you need a range of colors based on the primary colors, but slightly enriched. So there are perhaps 10 or 12 shades to produce. Then once we have these colors, they must be applicable to all fiber types, because every time you have a pigment, it doesn't attach exactly the same way to a given fiber that's a bit different from the one next to it. So we need to develop all these cases. And the third component of it is there are different types of machines in dye houses, and the technology needs to be compatible with each and every type of machine. So that's the entire playing field for the tech that we need to develop by, I'd say, cracking each case one after another to cover the full range and be able to target the entire market. So gradually, we're going to cover the widest possible range of situations, and that will provide us with a steadily increasing potential.
Are you able to find the necessary talent for this? Have you already recruited many people with PhDs? I imagine that your team is already quite international. Ultimately, is this a significant challenge for you?
We have a lot of people. Yes. Well, it turns out that the company's mission actually attracts talent. Yes, for one thing, we need very high-level talent in chemistry, highly specialized depending on the specific subjects. So today we have 7 PhDs who come from, I believe, almost 7 different countries. Why? Because there's a subject where we really need an expert. Well, we look at who's publishing theses on these specific subjects. We find 20 people across the entire globe, and then we approach them, and one of them wants to come because he lives on the other side of the planet. That's pretty much the core of the challenge. So when dealing with highly specialized profiles like these, we sometimes encounter these difficulties or surprisingly these excellent outcomes. And it's quite inspiring actually to persuade people based on the mission itself, the very thing that we Everdye need to solve. And then, yes, we also have engineering profiles who come from very, very diverse backgrounds, from quite a few different countries. I believe we have 9 nationalities and there are 25 of us. So that gives you a bit of an idea of the diversity. We have we have people coming from all sorts of countries, from many countries, from several continents. We have, I believe, more women than men. So there you have it for reasons of... It's curious because in the tech industry, people say there aren't enough women. And for us, it happens that our co-founder is a woman. It's also quite well recognized within the European tech sector. And we also have a lot of women on the team, perhaps because chemistry attracts, it's one of the scientific fields that attracts the most women among all the different tech subjects. So yes, human resources are obviously very, very important. We're operating in tech, so that requires very specialized skills. So there's still a tremendous amount of work on technology and a lot of work on industrialization, as we've already mentioned, because we need, and this is part of the specific talents we're actively seeking, other engineering talents, those who can manufacture our products at large, ever-increasing scales. And then a final technical focus, which represents our ultimate challenge, is the ability to apply our product on an industrial scale in dye houses. So this means we have to address questions that are very, not prosaic, but rather very localized issues. That is to say, the composition of water in one particular country is quite different from another. The available energy is not always the same. And access to certain specific resources, we cannot simply count on exactly the same resources in chemical terms. So you see, there are many things that need to be adapted locally, and that's primarily the role of dyeing engineers, yet another specific type of technician. But, the main challenges are to continue developing the technology, to significantly reduce the cost of production, and then simply commercialize it by ensuring the solution is adopted in all dye houses.
You announced your Series A funding round just a few months ago. What is the key milestone for your Series B, and will there even be a Series B, or might you already be profitable within the next 2 or 3 years?
Well, yes, there is a specific hypothesis we are actively researching.
Our goal is to become profitable within the next 2 to 3 years, and we'll need a Series B if we were to envision a slightly different growth phase. For example, if in 3 years we say, well, to answer that, I need to clarify something. We won't need to build our own factories. That's a very important point in our scale-up.
Actually, we can leverage the existing capabilities of chemists who are already working in the field. This is known as the tolling model, which means we then approach to outsource the synthesis of our pigments to chemists. So this is highly advantageous because it prevents us from having to focus on the construction and development of a factory, which demands very significant CapEx and OpEx resources. This will allow us to be more agile. However, one day, perhaps in 3 years, once we've successfully achieved these scale-ups with our partners, we might decide in terms of our industrial strategy that we actually need to own the factory. I can't definitively say that today.
What would be the incentives to own a factory?
Well, to reintegrate the margin our subcontractors make on our products.
Is there a potential risk that the subcontractors, let's imagine they are Chinese,
so that they might be able to understand your process?
It's actually well, firstly, when we're in Europe, the companies operating as subcontractors are very, very, how shall I put it, are extremely careful about this confidentiality, because otherwise they would be shooting themselves in the foot. If a subcontractor is known for appropriating or divulging the technology, well, they would quickly be banned. So there's no real issue. We're more cautious when it comes to going to Asia to protect ourselves, and consequently, all the scale-up stages, we carry them out on a European foundation to secure our position. For instance, the necessity of having to use, it's a global market, once again, as I said, so selling a pigment synthesized here in Europe to players in Southeast Asia, will that truly be feasible?
I don't know, economically. We talked about competitiveness. Maybe we'll have to build them there.
So in that particular situation, should we be looking to find or perhaps form a joint venture?
Our own factories, find a subcontractor who is reliable. All that, it's too early to say.
That's more a 2 to 4 year issue.
Yes, that's right. And at that point, we might need a Series B to, for example, invest massively in the industry, which isn't completely our preferred option, but we might be forced to go that route. And in that case, we'd have to do a Series B.
We haven't yet discussed your competitors. Do you have any startup or scale-up companies as competitors? Are chemists, you, the major players in the chemical industry, currently working on similar solutions?
We have a significant number of competitors who are primarily focused on developing biotechnology, which involves producing pigments and colorants through the use of bacteria. Regarding those, there are quite a few in Europe, perhaps 3 or 4, who are truly serious and doing excellent work. And that's great because it really helps to shake up the rather traditional microcosm of textile dyeing around the world. There are others outside Europe too.
Did you come together, or did you establish a federation that aims to challenge the status quo?
No, I don't think we necessarily have the time to do that, but yeah, we often meet at trade shows or with dyers, for example. So that proves we're entering the market. Other solutions are starting to emerge, and that's great. Traditional petrochemical chemists work on solutions that aim to optimize the process. So they seek products that work at lower temperatures, but they can't reach ambient temperature like we do. So their ratios, or rather their efficiencies, are always lower. Yeah, but they do take care of themselves, yes, to a certain extent. Later, one day, perhaps they'll be forced to accept disrupting the very foundation of their technology, which is petrochemicals, in fact.
As I mentioned in the introduction, what's particularly interesting in your career journey is that you were also the CEO of Petit Bateau and the CEO of La Redoute. How exactly did you come to become the CEO of Everdye? Could you please tell us a little bit about that process? Perhaps you could share a few words on your experience prior to Everdye, and then the specific moment when you made the decision to join Everdye.
Yes, it's true that I have a background. So I'm not a chemist, but I am an engineer nonetheless. So I pretty much understand what the teams tell me from a chemistry standpoint. And perhaps chemistry was the subject that interested me the most. So that was part of the decision at one point. But I've actually had quite a journey working within the personal and home outfitting industry, which primarily involved textiles, but also extended a bit more broadly. I found myself in the textile sector after an initial career phase as a consultant. I then joined one of my clients, a company known as Petit Bateau. At Petit Bateau, I worked for 12 years. Petit Bateau is a heritage company that still has its own factories. So when I went to my office, I would cross or pass by the dyeing workshop, the manufacturing workshop. In short, I discovered this world of textiles, which is a world that is at its core artisanal and industrialized craft because it's very hands-on. You really have to understand what it is. Textile involves a great deal of expertise, not always formally codified. So it's quite captivating, In any case, I personally really appreciate the products. And I was truly delighted to join a company that produced something tangible, something material. And that's the world of industry, but it's also the world of marketing, of sales, of the more sensitive aspects of creation, because you constantly need to develop new products and so on. So I really loved it because it was such a comprehensive, truly multifaceted environment. And that's precisely how I first came to discover the fascinating world of textiles. And then subsequently, I remained and continued working within this very same industry for the entirety of my professional career, right up until the point when I eventually joined Everdye. And what I can say is that deep down, I've seen ecological or awareness grow for 25 years. When I first joined the industry, we didn't really talk about the environment. We were eventually talking about organic cotton. That was roughly the extent of our discussion. Why? Because, just because. And what's more, we were interested in organic cotton because we felt it was less harmful to the skin. It was more for health reasons. Actually, yes, it had a vague connection to the pollution we put in the fields, but we weren't yet discussing climate change. We weren't talking about any of that.
We already discussed Made in France.
Yes, it has always been a topic because this isn't just an environmental issue, it's fundamentally a social one. And it so happens that Petit Bateau, the company I had joined, had practiced offshoring like almost all textile manufacturers, but they did it properly. That is by developing their own factories in Morocco, in Tunisia, and by training the local workforce. It was done in a responsible manner, ultimately by making the factories self-sufficient. So it wasn't just a case of I'm simply coming to exploit cheap labor. No, there was a local establishment, a real local presence.
It has definitely changed since then.
After that, the industry went to Asia. It's generally speaking, the European textile industry, or at least the French one, because other countries perform better in this regard, it somewhat sabotaged itself. That is, it massively resorted to offshoring to lower its prices, but it lost all its expertise. A huge part of our capabilities, a huge part of our expertise has vanished today. That doesn't mean there aren't still craftsmen and factories making extraordinary things, but overall, when we consider what the textile industry in France was like 40 or 50 years ago, and today it's still something that...
Just a quick mention for 1083,
right,
the French underwear company, which helps to bring back even a tiny portion of the textile industry.
No, but they're really fighting, and I want to salute them, especially Thomas, whom I know quite well, but from 1083, it's truly a battle, actually. We can clearly see that. To succeed, they have to fight against the economy. There are some really tough blows that are quite complicated to manage, but they always manage to pull through. And then to find the necessary skills and expertise to reactivate factories and bring back job profiles that no longer exist. So that's what I mean when I say industry sabotaged itself, is that not only did we lose capabilities, but we even lost the very know-how. So that means at some point when you want to restart things, well, it takes a lot of time. There you go. So it's easy. So that's I discovered this at Petit Bateau, and it was very exciting. And I discovered, as I mentioned, over these past 25 years, the ecological consciousness that has grown up to recent periods, obviously, where the IPCC reports, the skepticism regarding climate change, all of that. These are phases over the past 20 years that have been quite intense. And then more and more the companies that will tell themselves we really must do something have created action plans for CSR, as we say, for ESG. And I, as a business leader over these past few years, I've come to realize that to implement a truly massively impactful CSR plan, it required aligning an absolutely enormous number of actions across all social aspects. But if I focus solely on the environmental side, there wasn't a truly large-scale solution. And when I saw the Everdye project, I thought to myself, hey, here's a solution that... Remember the figures I mentioned earlier. If I were to adopt a solution like this, that's potentially 20 to 25% of my company's overall carbon footprint that would change.
We're almost at the point where, I'm ticking off the Paris agreements with an action. So that becomes interesting because in big companies, managing action plans that fill up an Excel spreadsheet line after line with 0.1% here, 2% there. Oh, and there's an action for 3%. It's tedious, it's annoying, and frankly, it's frustrating. Even if it probably needs to be done, it's frustrating. When you see a solution that has a tenfold impact, like 20, 30, 40, 30%, you think, wow, this is massive disruption. And that's what made me want, initially as a business angel, to invest and support the initiative. And then it turns out an opportunity arose. Life sometimes takes unexpected turns. And at Everdye, they encountered a management problem. Then through the network, because that's how Asterion operates, I was asked to help resolve this particular management issue. And then gradually, as I worked with the team, with Amira and with everyone else, while observing the ecosystem and the topic itself, I realized it connects to something which is not a matter of reason, but rather from the gut or the heart, I don't know, which is that when you've worked, when I believe I've worked 25 years in this industry, it's sick, it must regenerate, it must reinvent itself. And then you say, I'm here, I might have found a small lever that will allow me to help this industry. And it's a sort of give back, as we say in English. I said to myself, well, I'm going to go to the other side and I'll try. Instead of being with those who have the problems, meaning those who need 100-line Excel spreadsheets, I'll try to go to the other side, to those who offer one line of that spreadsheet that changes the game.
Tell us about that week when you realized this opportunity might be opening up for you. How did you approach the situation? Who did you discuss it with? You mentioned your gut reaction, but did you also try to rationalize the decision or did you just go with your instinct?
So the very starting point for all of this, it was a lunch with Stéphane Bourbier, and there you have it. So we can clearly see that the community is truly functioning well.
First, we got to know each other because we had only seen each other during COVID through Teams, so it's not very human, let's say. So then we have lunch, we tell each other about our lives. Then at the end, he tells me, "Hey, you've invested in Everdye. There's this topic. Could you help us solve it from a manager's perspective? Well, from a managerial perspective." So then, we start chatting, and I'm really getting into the discussion. But then we still have to leave, and then the days after, the week that you're talking about, that was 2 years ago, I believe. Yeah, 2 years. Yeah, it stays on loop. You know, I let it settle. My brain works like that. I don't try to resolve the issue. I let it settle to see how it still resonates. Well, a week later, it's still there, saying, "Hey, this thing." It was tempting me, and then at that point, rationality takes over. Obviously, I meet the team. Obviously, I start working on the subject. I do a kind of due diligence, actually. While working, I joined the board, so I delve much deeper into the company's operations, its business plan, and its prospects. And so there's both this rational side, but at some point, you have to decide. And it's true that you leave a job in a corporate environment. At the time, I was the general manager of Redoute. You're saying that this was a truly enormous professional adventure for me. We could certainly revisit that, but it had many entrepreneurial characteristics, you see. And that's precisely where I first discovered entrepreneurship. So in reality, life is truly a succession of various circumstances. Right now, the main focus is to re-engage in entrepreneurship on behalf of a cause, a particular cause that is very dear to my heart, working alongside individuals who are truly, truly brilliant, with dedicated investors, skilled collaborators, and a cohesive team within a specific world that I'm familiar with and where I can make a real impact. So at some point, no matter how rational we try to be, no spreadsheet will tell you, yes, you have to go for it. No, at some point, it's about desire. And I have children, and we say, what will we do? You spoke of 5 years, but what will we live in 20 or 30 years? That's it. So if we don't push things like Everdye, there are plenty of others. But if we don't push things like Everdye, there's little chance that the world in 30 years will be very different from today's. Where it will lead, I don't know. But in any case, the desire to contribute a little bit to change the trajectory, yes.
So you'd already had a quasi-entrepreneurial experience at La Redoute?
Yes, because we had done an MBI, which is a management buyout, and we were our own shareholders. We were truly in a pure entrepreneurial situation without any other shareholders but ourselves. So it was at the time I told the teams, we're not a startup, we're a restartup, which is very different. That is to say, you have to reinvent everything, you have to rewrite everything. It's not starting from a blank slate to do something, it's taking something back. And it was exciting.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary adventure. Anyway, La Redoute is almost 200 years old, you have to keep that in mind. And it really pivoted. Originally, it was a wool spinning mill.
And to be exact, those who founded La Redoute were farmers. So they went from being farmers to today, an e-commerce giant that has both feet in tech, in digital. If you will, well, it's a succession of transformations. Well, we've been the ones who've shaped the story of, I'd say, the past 12 years. And we've managed to keep this adventure going.
When you say we, how many of you are doing this cover?
Well, there was a management team specifically with Eric Balla and Eric Cortey and Nathalie Balla. And then there were quite a few of us, C-level executives, you could say. And after that, we had brought in 1,000 people from the company to be shareholders. So it was a subject that really ticked a lot a project that really ticked a lot of boxes in terms of its meaning. That is to say, we were in a way saving a company because it was almost about to disappear, involving the employees, and making a pivot, a business model pivot. So it was truly fascinating.
And at the time of the takeover, what was your position? So you were deputy general manager and you ended up as general manager. So at that point, exactly. You experienced a form of quasi-entrepreneurship, or at least a successful business takeover. Would you say that played a role in your decision to embark on the Everdye venture? You weren't exactly starting from scratch, we could say, when it came to taking risks.
Exactly. It applies in several areas. The desire, the virus, ultimately, of entrepreneurship. There's something quite exhilarating about holding the reins of a project and trying to see it through. Whether it's in the context of La Redoute or a startup, I think the underlying motivations are very similar. And the second point, yes, there's a question of risk-taking. And it's 12 years later, I'm the age I am, and that's how it is.
Also maturity and the urge to take a bit more risks, because I can too, you see.
You're giving the impression that this transition, it happened very easily. Had you ever imagined the life of a startup CEO to be different from how you're living it today? How does it truly play out for you deep in your gut, in your heart, and in your head today?
What I didn't tell you when I made the change is that I'm very interested in learning. I really enjoy learning. And I still had this feeling that I would learn a great deal because the context of a startup, I'd never experienced it before. But obviously it's somewhat of an unknown territory. So that's how it is. Even if you can read about things and so on, there's still the way you actually live and experience it. Yes, there are many things that have been quite different from what I had originally imagined. Yes, I actually discovered a new word.
When you left La Redoute, how many? And at Everdye, how many?
Well, there's a factor of 100, meaning we were close to 2,000, and at Everdye we were a little less than 20. So there you go. That's about it. It's a factor of 100. So yes, there's already it's a size is an element. I was right there in the open plan office in the midst of everyone. That was also the case before, but not quite the same open plan environment. Ultimately, there are very tangible, very practical aspects to consider. But fundamentally, what truly changes, what I've personally discovered, is that when you're the CEO of a startup like this, you experience 10 highs and 10 lows throughout the day. When you're the head of a more established company, even if nothing is truly won, nothing is ever really guaranteed. In an established company, let's say, well, at least one the size of La Redoute, you experience highs and lows. It's like a swell of the ocean, if you will. When you're on a big boat, the swell can be quite unsettling, but it has a fairly long frequency, meaning you see the waves coming, the high and low waves, you can anticipate them. In a startup, you're on on this sea, you're on a large cruise ship, so you're somewhat protected from that, even if you can still be a little bit bothered. When you're in a startup, you're in a small boat in very intense choppy water, so you're constantly being tossed around. There's never a moment when we are truly calm. Because one phone call is fine, the next phone call isn't, an email, I don't know what. an announcement, well, a decision, a management problem with 20 people that takes on gigantic proportions. In a big company, there can be management problems, but it's more about the sheer numbers where, well, yes, okay. So that exists there too, but it's really, as a CEO, it's really the impact of things personally, It's that's quite a thing, quite a lot of listening and self-work to tell yourself, this is how I manage this frequency of good and bad news.
And how did you change your whole mindset? Did you get some support? Do you have coaches? Do you talk with other entrepreneurs?
Well, that's partly where there's the community aspect, which is really interesting. So in Asterion, we are just one of the contributions to Asterion. There are all the others. There's quite a strong animation of this community with access to resources, whether it's podcasts, webinars, etc. So I really make an effort to do that because obviously we don't have vast resources, so we need to find ones that are available. But there's great support from Asterion, first and foremost. Other investors since then will also contribute, but it's very important not to be alone. So other entrepreneurs, exchanging a lot with other entrepreneurs, that's good. So yes, you need to have your small network of entrepreneurs. Coaching, I haven't really committed to it myself, but maybe I will. I don't think there's any taboo about it. There are times when it's useful. Precisely, I think it was a bit early. Then I had to really get a handle on this new thing, but maybe it will come. In any case, I recommend, it's one of Asterion's recommendations, and I fully agree that founders don't stay alone because there's the issue of loneliness. Well, one thing that's important is that I don't consider myself alone. I have Amira and sure a few others around us who are very important. So the team is extremely important. Amira, she obviously has a very particular role. And I was recently reading about how we succeed better with partners. Well, I think that's fundamentally true, both because of complementary skills and simply because collaboration with very different profiles is often fruitful for, not to go it alone and faster, but perhaps more surely by confronting things. There you go. So I think for me, the key point is to get help with technical things that you can't just invent, and then not be alone overall, both concerning management and how to view the market. In short, on many things, you really need to confront the outside world.
Philippe, you were just mentioning Amira, who is Everdye CTO. How does one go about building a strong working relationship with one of the company's co-founders, especially one with a technical profile? How did you two manage to get yourselves aligned and on the same page during those initial months of your professional relationship?
So I think the starting point is profiles that are completely unrelated. Even though I'm an engineer, so I can have quite in-depth discussions with her from a technical standpoint, but I let her take the lead on that.
This is happening. Do you think that?
Yes, you still need to understand each other. Yes, indeed. Well, anyway, when you're selling a tech solution, you need to know how to talk about it. You must make the effort, at least. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean being an engineer, but you must make the effort to understand. And generally, a scientist, he likes it when he's a bit ambiguous about that. At the same time, he likes it when we show interest in his topic, but then he's a bit secretive because it's very technical, you see. Anyway, I think that from that point of view, it wasn't really a problem. No, what I truly felt when seeing Amira is a lot of talent, technologically, and also a lot of ambition and a quite engaging personality. So that really works. And from then on, I thought to myself, this girl, she's just brimming with talent. She has conviction. She truly wants to change the world, and I found that absolutely amazing. I told myself how my role here is also to help her in some way. So I'm both the CEO, but also I try to help her progress. And by the way, it's something that's completely transparent between us. She's obviously more of a scientist, less of a manager. So she still has things to learn and to develop. So there's this kind of role, a duo that's complementary, and there's no rivalry at all. It's just I give myself the mission to help her both to succeed in the Everdye project, obviously, which I'm part of, but also to progress because she has a lot of ambition.
she's Tunisian. She comes from a place where the stakes for progress are enormous, both for the country's development, for environmental concerns, and for the role of women. You see, there are very diverse topics around her personality, given her history.
And how does she help you to progress?
Well, first, because she has this Everdye project that we really need to crack. It's true that I learn a lot from startups, from the way startups operate. So that really challenges me a lot in how I do things. There are managerial principles that aren't very different from, when it comes to team management. Yes, there are notions of large programs when you're in a corporate setting and so on. Here, for us, that's not the main subject. However, there are micromanagement or one-on-one management principles that remain very true, you see. So she helps me to be a better boss, a mentor, a boss. She influences my way of being a leader, because here it's about being a leader in the day-to-day, making an impact almost on daily behavior, on clearly perceiving priorities. So she really challenges me a lot on that point, which means I know that she's just brimming with ideas. She has 1,000 ideas a minute. And so my role is also to channel her energy, to focus on what's truly a priority. Now, that's a kind of role-playing dynamic that helps me stay focused and develop a different form of leadership, one that's very, indeed, absolutely essential in a startup environment.
There's one point we haven't touched upon yet, and that's how Everdye could become known to the wider public or to the final consumer. I know you've considered the possibility that it might eventually become an ingredient brand, much like Gore-Tex. Is the idea that in a few years from now, when we purchase a piece of clothing, we'll see made by Everdye?
We'd like that, yeah. That's it would truly be the holy grail to be the trusted endorsement, rather than an environmental label that might be obscure and not easily understood by the average person. We want Everdye to truly mean something in the consumer size, and for them to see it as a genuine guarantee of a green attitude, to put it simply. When you see ads, you definitely see the respect for Intel, which has, back when Intel Inside was a thing, it was associated with major tech giants. So it was, now maybe that's no longer true, maybe it's others, but they created consumer brands that guaranteed the choice, in fact. If we could become that, it would be our holy grail. That means, firstly, we would be adopted, and with that brand goodwill, which would be extremely interesting. So we're trying to, for now, we're not aiming to be a consumer brand at this moment, but we're doing everything we can to ensure the brand is talked about already within the professional sphere in the B2B sector. But one day, the question of our presence on consumer products will certainly arise, yes.
What makes you confident about the current situation in France and in Europe?
It's a funny question, because I feel like in the current climate, we're asking what are the reasons for concern, you know. So what makes me confident, it's still, when I chose this, I looked at young people and I told myself, there's still... It is necessary that we all collectively, in an intergenerational way, have this awakening, this desire to create a slightly better world. Current events aren't helping us, but I do think there's still a flame of optimism that we have to search for quite deep within ourselves to keep the hope of still influencing the course of things. Now, what makes me optimistic are all these initiatives. When you're in the world of startups, you see the abundance of ideas, the abundance of brilliant minds working on the subject. That really gives you confidence, because we truly need this kind of leadership. We need these talented individuals to get things moving, to try and envision something entirely different. And that's truly fascinating. When you're feeling a bit down, you really should go out and meet the other startup folks, because you'll see they're so enthusiastic. All that enthusiasm is still quite fascinating, you know. This ability of younger generations to take on subjects, to try and crack them. And I find that it is done with a benevolent attitude. Often we've tried to pit generations against each other. For me, that's not what I see in the startup world. It's ultimately, we first think about finding a solution rather than blaming those responsible for the situations we face. So I want to hold on to that, to this form of human resilience that makes talents emerge and tackle these challenges.
You are 20 now at Everdye, right?
We're over 20 even.
How do you, your team is very international. How much time do you spend developing the culture, and what actions do you take to create a very strong culture?
We're working, we have, how should I put it, a specific initiative to integrate cultural diversity. Because in fact there isn't a major problem, but there is still language isn't an issue, meaning we all speak English. What's surprising is to see that many of the people who are not native French speakers are actually learning French.
We have Vietnamese people, Brazilians who are learning French, who are making the effort, and I find that to be...
No visa issues, by the way.
So regularly we face issues with visa processing times for some, but it eventually comes through. But you have to prove, and this seems partly normal, that the talent isn't available in France. So it's a way to ensure we make an effort to also employ French people. And so that's why sometimes it's a bit slow to obtain the necessary formalities for specific profiles coming from abroad. But we do eventually get those authorizations. And what truly transcends cultural differences is the common project. Actually, where we encounter fewer cultural problems, it's because the sheer clarity of the mission, the undeniable purpose of the quest we're all on, well, that smooths things over. Beyond that, it's just a matter of day-to-day issues, you know. For me, it's no more complicated than this. There are those who are vegans, there are those who are Muslims, Catholics, Vietnamese, Brazilians. The reasons for diversity are, I'll mention, I'm not listing all the reasons for diversity, but we're doing some work where we're leaving early December for 2 days, and we have a specific workshop on managing diversity within the team to see how we can further improve things in terms of operations. It's true that there are cultural biases in management, so we need to try and uncover them.
Such as?
Nonsense. Well, the whole thing is, do I express myself, how should I put it, very directly or not quite so directly? Do I just say yes, or do I say to hell with it? Is that how I operate?
Who is straightforward? Which culture is more straightforward?
I find that there are some people who are. So is it? I won't make a generalization because I wouldn't claim to know all the countries in the world nor their culture. But we have groups of people who are rather reserved, meaning they won't really open up from a personal point of view, whereas others are much more open and say a lot more. And I'm not sure we're statistically representative of is it from people, is it from nationalities? I don't know. But it's true that the Anglo-Saxon world, for example, what I've observed is that it's much more natural to provide feedback when you're an Anglo-Saxon than when you're French. For us in France, concepts like reward and positive or negative feedback just don't resonate. So there are real cultural differences concerning, for instance, these kinds of things in management.
Let's talk to the potential future CEOs of startups, especially those coming from a corporate environment. If you had 3 pieces of advice to offer or 3 key takeaways from your experience, what would they be for those who are hesitant to make the jump?
Well, the very first and most important thing, above all else, is to really listen to that inner voice, to follow your gut feeling, or indeed to stand by your deepest convictions. When you're in the corporate world, you're influenced, you're in a conventional setting, meaning when you're in a certain role, the logical progression is to do this, then that, then that. This is already true within companies. There are privileged patterns, we could say. And then beyond that, once you've achieved a certain position, I don't know, a C-level role in one company, you then have to move to another one. You know, there are these kind of career paths that are imposed by public opinion or by what people will say or by how you manage your career. Well, if you'd like to consider this, there is indeed another path, which is to follow your own, to create your very unique story, guided by your personal convictions. That's the idea. So that essentially means following your inner intuition, what you genuinely desire, truly listening to yourself, you know. This then is the very first subject we need to address.
The second thing is when you're in a corporate environment, you shouldn't get too attached to your status.
That is, you have things that are tied to certain posts, you know, things. Anyway, I'm quite detached from it. I don't really care, but I see that some stop themselves from considering another path because, well, I wouldn't have this or I wouldn't have that. I wouldn't be able to access positions in boards of directors in I don't know what. Anyway,
at the moment you made this decision, did you get any feedback from your friends working in corporate
that might
jobs?
have been surprising.
But you're crazy, huh?
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. I'd already experienced that when I joined La Redoute, which was a company on the brink. drink. And then when we took over, they told us, "Oh, you're crazy. It'll never work." So there's that side to it. So that's where you need to be even stronger about what makes it so that ultimately we risk falling under the sway of all this gossip of these people who, without necessarily meaning any harm, but is so completely outside their usual frame of reference that they can only be surprised and quite resistant.
Yes, because there's a good chance it will work, and even if it doesn't, what's the worst that could happen?
Well, that's what I tell myself. Ultimately, when you launch a business, there's the desire to succeeding financially and so on. That's often what's tied to entrepreneurship, but above all, it's about succeeding in the mission. I mean, first of all, I think if there's a mission we truly believe in, that's what we fundamentally want to commit to as investors. It's not just about making money. I believe that in impact investing, that's not what truly drives people. So there's everything what makes us positively go for it. And then, so what if we fail? Because it's quite probable to fail for many different reasons. Well, in fact, what will we have accomplished? We will have learned. That's what I was mentioning just now. It's the desire to learn, the desire to first and foremost not fail completely, because somehow, even if we miss a certain economic objective or at some point a technological milestone, we will still have moved the subject forward. So we won't have failed entirely. And then personally, we learned. That's it. I don't want, at my age, I'm 57, I still want to learn. Because we know it's not new, but life is made of learning I still have many years of learning ahead of me. And by the way, you were asking me about Amira or about the team. For me, young people teach me many things in other ways of being, other ways of thinking, other ways of reacting, other ways of mobilizing their energy. So I think all of that, these are motivating factors that mean you have to listen to yourself. So actually, regarding your question, I only have one, this subject. It's your own personal introspection, what you want, what you truly want to experience through your work.
Do you know other profiles who haven't crossed the line?
Yeah, I know another one, a very good friend who, it's funny, Guillaume Thomé, you see, we were in prep school together, 25 or 30 years ago, even 30. Today he spent his entire career in chemistry, in petrochemicals. And at one point he just said, stop.
He was the head of many very polluting sites and so on.
Then he thought, no, I'm going to go into I want to make an impact. He was looking to make an impact, and he ended up in an American startup that's establishing itself in France, and which in this case does regeneration of textile films. So it's funny because he studied chemistry, he ends up in textiles, and I was in textiles, I do chemistry. So it's but yes, he made the same choice, almost the same choice as me at the same time. That's quite surprising. It didn't influence anything because we didn't even know it, but we just ended up like that, which is quite amusing. But I think it also perhaps corresponds to a time in life when we think we want to leave something else than contributing to an industry that's highly criticized, even by the young, but by the whole world. So at some point, what then?
So did the way your loved ones, your children, see you influence your decision-making?
I told myself when I made this decision, among other reasons, or after I'd made it, that it would bring me closer to them. Because my children have been entrepreneurs, so experiencing the world of entrepreneurship, as Bateau, I've already had a discussion with one of my daughters about it. The thing is, I feel like I'm falling back into my youth a little bit, because generally entrepreneurship is often associated with young people. We think of modern tools, modern management methods, and collaborative approaches. And just like that, I was back in that environment, and it was quite refreshing. The issue of the planet, I believe there aren't many young people who are not interested in it, whether more or less directly, but it's integrated into their way of thinking. And I had the impression of being somewhat less on the accused's bench somehow. So Circuish is also a reason for our choices when we're no longer young and not between 20 and 30. That plays a role too. So it's part of this introspection, asking ourselves what we truly desire, what in the morning when we wake up, we think, oh dear, this perspective weighs me down, or what I'm ultimately happy about. And if we're not on a good subject or in the right position, it's difficult to feel joy. We might have a little more difficulty feeling joy in the morning when we get up.
Whether Everdye succeeds in 5 attempts or fails, what would have been the fundamental reason?
Oh, wow. First and foremost, we are absolutely going to succeed. But if we have indeed achieved that success, it's because we possess the knowledge and the capability to crack the problems, but without forgetting the grand design, by focusing on things that can be tackled in the short term. If we only think about the ultimate victory, we will never achieve it. And the truth is, deep tech is truly a long and arduous path. It's a marathon, a long-haul race. Before you think about the last mile, you must first think about the next one, and that's truly the main point, to be focused on the current priorities. So that's the reason why we will succeed, and the reason why we will fail. There are so many. So I don't know. That's how the world will evolve, whether at every level we'll have help or hindrances, the regulations, the consumer, how they will evolve. Will they change their priorities a little? Will they...
The industry where we acted will...
to continuous movement of awakening to these topics of sustainability. These are questions that are pending. When we look at short cycles, see over the past year, we see that things are not entirely moving in the right direction. I don't think it stops the movement towards sustainability, but it accelerates it at times, and at others, it slows it down a bit. So we also have to go through these sometimes challenging cycles to then find others.
Have there been moments in the last 2 years where you've revisited your career and thought, I could have been an entrepreneur even sooner? Or in fact, when the La Redoute opportunity presented itself, did you just seize it?
Yes, there were other moments, other opportunities where I could have been an entrepreneur in different forms. Because in fact, when I was looking for my job before joining La Redoute, it was fundamentally to find an entrepreneurial role. And I joined La Redoute because I knew there was a very high probability that it would become what it is today. In this instance, the reason I was returning to La Redoute was also because of the potential for an entrepreneurial adventure, which did materialize. It's always a probability. That's also part of entrepreneurship in career management. You have to make choices, taking some risks on future prospects. So that's... But at the same time, I was considering various business acquisition opportunities, and the La Redoute option was ultimately the one that won out. I actually enjoy fixing things. That there are these patterns that we have in our brain or our heart or our gut. But when you look at certain aspects of your psychological profile, I'm more someone who will repair or help, who will optimize, than someone who starts from a blank slate. That's just how it is. I deal with it like that. I accept it, and it's no big deal. So ultimately, we were just talking about Amira. She's more of a blank canvas kind of person, and I make sure that her project moves forward and comes to fruition. That's kind of that's the whole point. And that's why I think I wasn't before, because I don't think that in my younger years I would have had the mindset or a certain mindset or way of thinking. I'm not sure how to phrase it. It wasn't a natural inclination for me back then. It became clear when I started working in larger organizations and in situations where my initial sense of entrepreneurship was about saving companies. For me, that was also a form of entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Philippe. A final word, perhaps?
Thank you, Antonin. It's always interesting to talk about the Everdye adventure. And thank you, because these were somewhat new perspectives on what I'm currently experiencing. And it's also good through this kind of podcast to take a step back. Thank you.